All right, time for world politics. We'll see what's going on in the political landscape, see if anybody. It may be an abbreviated edition. It may not be an abbreviated edition, but we'll see what goes on and all in that space. But new GOP spending proposal emerges after Trump sinks the original deal. So that is one of the things that's being reported in the political realm. So key Republican House members have come up with a new proposal to fund the federal government, according to sources, though it remains unclear if it will get enough support to pass before the deadline to avert a government shutdown at the end of the day on Friday. A vote is expected around 6 p.m. Tonight. So we'll see if this actually takes place in the next hour or so and what goes on in that space. President-elect Donald Trump, who signed an earlier bipartisan spending bill, has publicly urged lawmakers to support the new proposal. Congress has been scrambling since Trump came out against the original bill and injected the politically fraught issue of the U.S. debt limit into negotiations, saying he wants an increase approved before Inauguration Day. So, meanwhile, key choices for Trump's cabinet are back on the Capitol Hill this week as Defense Secretary Pete Hedges, who Democrats argue is not qualified due to his past behavior, will have a confirmation hearing on January 14th. So we're definitely seeing how this will play out as well. And Texas Representative Chip Roy says lawmakers are still trying to solve the problem when asked about President-elect Donald Trump's call for him to be primaried. So the Republican lawmaker said he hasn't been able to read all of Trump's statements in which the president-elect is saying that Roy is getting in the way of a Republican victory for cheap publicity. When read a portion of the statement by CNN, including how Trump said weak and ineffective people like Chip have to be dismissed as being utterly unknowledgeable as to the ways of politics and as to making America great again, Roy responded, "We're working right now on how to actually cut spending, which is what the voters sent me to Washington to do." On the debt ceiling, Roy said you can't lift the debt ceiling or suspend the debt ceiling without structural reform to save money. That's the bottom line. It's like increasing your credit card limit while you don't do anything about the spending and all along those lines. So, like I said, there's lots going on in the political landscape. So I'll bring in Rick Rosner. We'll see if other folks join me as well. I'm hoping that Nick joins as well because I do have an interesting concept about the whole sports and trans situation because I'd seen a video that I sent to him, and I'll see if I can download it and see what folks' responses are to that. And by the way, it looks like I had gotten rid of part of what the quote was, but it was, it's like increasing your credit card limit while you don't do anything to constrain spending. So we'll see what goes on in that space. And of course, Herb Jeffries is also in the conversation as well because Representative Greg Meeks, a close ally of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, says he sees no reason for Democrats to provide votes for Johnson's redrafted spending bill. I think we negotiated the deal in good faith. Meeks told CNN, asked if Democrats should support the bill. We negotiated. That should be the bill that goes over to the Senate. This is madness. It doesn't make sense. But let's see what Rick's got to say about all of this notion of what's going on and all along.
All right. So it's the end of the year, and I've been drinking sangria, so I'm a little buzzed. But I put together a list of some of the trends that are shaping the future, and then I've got a list from Google AI about what's the present. So let's start with the future. Trends: AI, quantum computing, cyber warfare, AI disinformation. AI is just super duper disruptive, and as quantum computing kicks in, it'll make some forms of computing way more powerful. So we are sinking into a swamp of cyber bullshit, and that's going to be a constant disruption, for decades to come.
It sounds like that'll be a constant disruption. So a lot of AI will be coming into the framework, is what you're saying.
And then you got climate change that is going to push animals around, plants around, people who live on the coasts around, contributing to war. And let's see what else. Increasing lifespan, increasing selfishness. So social media makes us more selfish. Improvements in medicine will make it possible for younger people and maybe even us to live longer. The longer you live, the less you want to have babies. So we've got declining birth rates. We got increasing wealth inequality, because when old people who have all the money don't die, then they continue to have all the money. Let's see what else we got. Wealth inequality. So those are trends shaping the future.
That sounds like some good trends. I'm impressed with the trends that you came with, and all along those lines. So these trends are those that are going to shape the whole notion of what's
But
going
I have
on.
more, because AI. If sometimes if you type a question into Google, AI sends you an article, and it says. So AI is telling us some of the top global issues for 2024 include geopolitics, with words I don't even know. Election super cycle. Yeah, okay. So 33 national elections across the world this past year. 27 of those elections kicked out the incumbents. So there's a huge amount of political pissed offness across the world.
Yeah, speaking of that and everything, I saw this interesting Instagram quote, and I don't know what you think about it, but I'll just mention it, and maybe you can got some thoughts around it. But it was around the notion of the corporate tax rate, because Trump wants to cut the corporate tax rate to 15%, and apparently, according to this Instagram quote that came in from Joanne Reed and everything, the 5 largest banks will get a $4.1 billion tax cut. The 5 largest drug makers will get a $3.1 billion tax cut, and the 5 largest U.S. oil companies will get a $2.5 billion tax cut.
That's such crazy bullshit. I mean, it might happen. He might be able to pull it off, but the corporate tax rate is only 21% right now, which is like the lowest it's been in decades. It's freaking low, and I don't think further lowering the corporate tax rate will bring more business back to the U.S.
Well, that's what he's claiming, because apparently the 5 largest grocery stores would also get a $1.57 billion tax cut. And
the grocery stores have already gotten a huge boost via inflation. They've used inflation to boost their profit margins. So this is all bullshit, and it's that money is going to come out of stuff that people need, like Social Security and Medicare. And Social Security and Medicare we pay for those things. It's not like we're asking the government to spend money that it doesn't have on it. We have paid into Social Security and Medicare throughout all our working lives through paycheck deductions. And Trump and some of the Republicans want to steal from us and give that money to corporations. It's freaking horrible.
Well, speaking of people getting good deals, and we've been talking about the administration and some of the ones that are getting good jobs and everything, but it's interesting. Apparently, Herschel Walker is going to be ambassador to the Bahamas. So I guess it's one of his trade-offs for running that campaign against Raphael Warnock and everything. But now he's going to be running as the ambassador to the Bahamas. I didn't know he had a love of the Bahamas.
Right. So we know that Herschel Walker's not super smart, but it doesn't matter that much, because like ambassadorships, especially to teeny countries like the Bahamas, are not that pivotal in terms of world politics. That's fine, and he'll have a staff that is competent. He'll be having the people under him will likely be competent, and they'll take care of everything, and he'll just be the face of the government, the U.S. government in the Bahamas. And maybe one of those staff members will eventually write a sitcom about what it was like.
What it was like to be there, just kind of like you wrote and were involved in some sitcoms and all along those lines.
Yeah, so there's a good show about diplomacy called The Diplomat with Felicity, Carrie Russell. And it's a really fun show. And unlike Herschel Walker, her character is not an idiot, though she does dumb stuff out of inexperience. And then her husband is also a diplomat, played by Rufus Sewell. They're both very charming actors. They got Allison Janney in the 2nd season. It's a good show. It's a lot of fun. A lot of stuff happens. So I know if you don't want to, watch that instead of Herschel Walker.
And Jacoby's joined us as well, so maybe he'll get on camera. He might be going to the game and everything like that, because I do know that he is involved with some sports and all along those lines and everything. So we'll see if he's going to join us or not. But this is the one that I found that was quite interesting. A lot of this I sent to Nick and hoping that Nick would be here to respond, but I'll just play them for you and see your thoughts. And this is the one around the trans issue and everything. And this was a Congress person talking about how many trans athletes there are versus another problem that exists as well, and all along those lines. So this ought to be interesting, and hopefully y'all can catch it and everything. We'll see. Hold on. I got to bring it back up.
Okay. Are you aware of?
Less than 10.
Less than 10
Yep.
out of 510,000?
Yep.
Are you governed when it comes to the policy of the NCAA by state law?
Of course.
So if 25 of the 50 states currently say that transgender children can play in sports according to their gender identity, you're bound by that standard?
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say on this subject?
I think part of our challenge is dealing with a very murky set of court decisions and at the state and federal level around this issue, which creates a certain lack of clarity around our policy, because our policy ultimately needs to comply with federal policy. Which is why guidance either on the regulatory side or on the statutory side would be very helpful.
510,000 athletes, 10 transgender athletes nationwide.
Or less.
I assume the NCAA is also concerned with other issues in women's sports.
The harassment that I speak of is far more prevalent in major women's championships than it is in men's championships. And in fact, the data that we put forward from our major championships last year showed that the worst examples of online threats, abuse, and harassment were being directed at women basketball players playing in our women's basketball tournament. That in many respects, I think, is not as well known as it should be. We tried to do a pretty good job to promote it and make clear to people that that was, in fact, the championship that had the most brutal and the most troubling and the nastiest collection. And all we know of is what shows up on their public handle. We don't know what's on the stuff they're getting in their direct messages. We talked to a lot of the folks who played in those tournaments, and they said the stuff that comes in on their DMs is a lot worse than the stuff that we see on their public handle.
I wish my colleagues who share my concern and yours for the future of women's sports could have heard your testimony. I think it's very important. How many athletes are there in the United States in NCAA schools?
All right. It's repeating.
500.
All right. All right. So I just have to say, holy crap, were voters sold a bill of goods? That the Republicans said that, the trans athletes are coming, trans people are coming, and fewer than one out of every 50,000 college athletes is trans, which is just most people will play their entire collegiate career without encountering a single trans athlete. Plus, out of the 9 or 10 out of 500,000 athletes, that you can count on both hands, how many of them are actually good athletes who are like a threat, competitive threat or a physical threat to their fellow athletes? Maybe 3. You got that big old swimmer girl, trans girl. She's big, she's a good swimmer, but if you're only talking about 5 problematic trans athletes that you need to evaluate, say you spend 100 hours or 200 hours evaluating those few people, do it to see whether they are a threat to other athletes, whether it's unfair. You can do it on a case-by-case basis, because the number of trans athletes who are good enough to be super competitive in threats is, you can count them on one single freaking hand. Yet the trans issue like turned the election.
Right? That definitely was a big important factor.
Out of, or somebody help me run the numbers. There are 244 million eligible people of voting age in the U.S.
Mhm.
Trump won the popular vote by 2.286 million. He won the popular vote over Harris by 0.937%, and which is not much, less than 1%. And part of selling Trump to America was generating fear about trans people and trans athletes, and it's a negligible freaking issue.
And that's what that gentleman that was testifying was basically admitting, because he basically said that there are maybe 10 trans athletes in all of the world. So,
and out of the 10, I bet you like 5 or 6 of them suck and really are never going to even, medal or come in, do, very well at all in their sport.
Agreed. They probably won't do much at all. But I was going to bring in another one just because I was having fun finding these, and that's why I sent them to Nick. And I think you'll enjoy this one as well. This is actually about because of something else we talk about often, which is DEA, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a brother that has actually went to Harvard Law School and everything, but he talks about his experience and all along those lines, and Herschel Walker's ambassadorship. So let's check this out just really briefly as well and see what he's got to say, this brother that was involved in that space. Okay. But I can get it up. There we go. Hold on. Give me a time. Hopefully it'll come up shortly. My computer's having a moment.
I can see it's taken a second to decide.
Yeah, it's trying to decide what it wants to do. While it waits and decides, I'll see what we talk about this and everything. So see if I can get it.
Come on, little guy. There he is.
And Herschel Walker to be ambassador to the Bahamas. And on the same day, we're learning that the number of Black students entering Harvard Law School has dropped by more than half. Now, when you think of Herschel Walker, the first thing that comes to mind is probably not Harvard University. But these two stories are actually connected. They both reflect the hypocritical racial identity politics of the Trump Republican Party. This is a photo of Black students in my graduating class at Harvard Law School in 1992. You can see me in the top right corner, the handsome guy with hair. There were nearly 70 of us in total. But now, after the Trump-dominated Supreme Court banned race-based affirmative action in college admissions, the number of first-year Black law students at Harvard just dropped to 19, the lowest number since 1965, and only 6 of them are Black men. Why does this matter? Because Harvard produces more Black lawyers than any law school in the country except Howard University. Credit to our HBCUs for the essential work they do in educating our people. Harvard Law School grads include Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, former First Lady Michelle Obama, British Secretary of State David Lammy, former Howard University Dean Charles Hamilton Houston, Baltimore Ravens President Sashi Brown, Merck CEO Ken Frazier, Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, my classmates Terry Sewell and Anthony Brown, both of whom served in Congress, my schoolmate Hill Harper, and even the fictional characters Philip Banks of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and the legendary Annalise Keating from How to Get Away with Murder. By the time I got to Harvard in 1989, we had to fight to get more diversity in the faculty. Following in the footsteps of our professor, Derek Bell, the first tenured Black professor at the law school, we held student protests, occupied the dean's office, and even sued our own law school because we knew that diversity, equity, and inclusion were vital components of a well-rounded education. In law school, I took a critical race studies class with Professor Bell, and one of my schoolmates was a young Black man named Barack Obama, who became the first Black president of the Harvard Law Review. But now, unfortunately, America is slowly moving backward. And that's exactly what MAGA Republicans want. Make America great again means there was some time in the past when America was actually great. Presumably sometime when patriarchal white supremacy reigned and Black and brown people, women, LGBTQ people, and others knew their place. To serve this white fantasy, they created a myth called meritocracy and created a lie that affirmative action, DEI, had lowered the standards for universities and businesses. They obsessed over test scores when that was never the primary standard for admission to top schools. Half of all students with perfect test scores were not even admitted to Harvard. But for decades, when mediocre white guys with money, connections, and family legacies were admitted to top schools, No one had a problem, yet the prospect of talented black students at the nation's top institutions threatened their delusion of white supremacy. Rich white people with power and privilege then weaponized the myth of meritocracy to convince poor and middle-class white people that struggling black and brown people, who only made up a small fraction of the student bodies and workforce, were the real reason why they couldn't get into the college they wanted or the job they wanted. But Republicans didn't want to sound racist, so they found one line from Dr. King's decades of speeches where he says, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." And they used that line to develop a ridiculous and ahistorical concept called color blindness. Which brings us back to Herschel Walker. Walker is an anti-choice black Republican who lost the Georgia Senate race in 2022 after being outed as the deadbeat dad who paid for a woman to have an abortion, neglected his 10-year-old son, abused his ex-girlfriend, threatened his ex-wife, lied about being a high school valedictorian, lied about graduating from college, lied about being a police officer, and still won 88% of white evangelical voters. In fact, Republicans recruited Walker, an inexperienced former football player then living in Texas, to run against Georgia's Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, the pastor of Dr. King's Atlanta church, mainly because he was the same skin color as his opponent. I guess Mike Tyson's black job will be ambassador to Haiti.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
After decades of white-splaining Dr. King's message to argue that America should follow merit instead of color, Republicans picked an unqualified black football player primarily because of the color of his skin to go against the pastor of Dr. King's own church. Let this be another lesson, folks. They don't care about meritocracy. They care about white supremacy.
Okay, first off, he slanders Tyson there by comparing him to Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is a dope. Tyson is actually, now Tyson was a savage fighter, right? And kind of got out of control in the ring sometimes, but he's a thoughtful guy. He's not a dumb guy. You listen to him talk. He's smart, he's witty, he's still probably kind of a lunatic, but that's what you need to be a legendary boxer. So not
you got to be a lunatic just to step into the ring, just to go and get your.
He mentioned, I know a lot about meritocracy, and I can tell you that anytime anybody starts talking about IQ and race, there's a 98% chance that person is a creep. There have been a bunch of studies about IQ and race and books written, and a lot of the studies and the heritability of IQ, a lot of these studies turned out to be fake, turned out to be bullshit. The most durable studies that show that IQ is heritable, it's nature rather than nurture, are twin studies separated at birth. You go out into the world, you find sets of identical twins where the mom had to give them up, and then one was sent to a rich household and the other was sent to a poor household, and then you take their IQs and you find out that even under wildly different circumstances, their IQs are pretty much the same. So IQ must be, something you're born with. The trouble with those studies is they are bullshit. They're fake. They were made up. It took decades sometimes to show, but like the one out of England, that's the most famous twin study, none of the twins existed. The guy who was knighted for his work by the Queen made it all up. None of those twins were real. So just run away from anybody who likes to. Also, it doesn't freaking matter. Say there were heritable differences in IQ. It doesn't freaking matter, because with smartphones and AI, we can all be as smart or dumb as we want to be. There's a new article out in Forbes about how AI might be making smart people dumber because nobody has to do their own writing anymore. That AI will write the article for you.
Hey, I'll write the whole article for you. ChatGPT will write articles for you.
2 seconds, ask it a question. Give me 1,200 words on, the wealth of pilgrims in America from 1620 to 1720. AI would do that for you in ChatGPT can do that for you in 2 seconds.
2 seconds flat, right?
Yeah, my buddy and I were asking the newest chat, which is called ChatGPT 01, I think, and it was just giving us answers that would get an A in a class within 2 seconds. One time we asked it a particularly hard question. It took 4 seconds. You know,
Wow. It only took 4 seconds?
well, that was for a hard question. For an easy question, 1.5 seconds.
Wow, that's really impressive. So it was not wasting any time
No,
whatsoever.
no.
It
And
was
so
just
why do your own thinking when AI can do it for you?
AI will just do the whole thing for you, and it'll be like, "Hey, you can handle this because the AI has done it for you," and all along those lines. So,
Oh,
yeah,
I looked up the population of the Bahamas.
yes,
400,000 people. It's the 171st biggest country in the world out of about 200 countries. You know, it's 400,000 people. That's less than Albuquerque. You could have named, you know, Walker ambassador to Albuquerque, and he would have had a more important job.
you would have had a more important job as the ambassador to Albuquerque.
So,
Yeah, I mean, no, you didn't say Albuquerque. That's New Mexico, but
yeah,
whatever. Cool. That's very good and everything. So definitely there's a lot going on in that space. What's your take on Jasmine Crockett? Because she was over there on another.
I love her. She's well spoken. I'm a shallow guy. So like I like that she's cute, you know. She shows up decked out and she's a good speaker. She has memorable phrases and she doesn't hesitate to call people out for bullshit. So
And that's
I
what
like
she was
her.
doing on. That's what she was doing on the post that I saw earlier today. She was calling out this notion of apparently Texas got some new Senate seats and everything along those lines, but apparently in the gentrification, the seats have gone to majority white districts, even though the majority of the people that were actually counted and newly counted were black and brown folks. So she was
Right, because Texas's governance, its political leaders are Republicans. So
Right.
Texas has been trending blue or turning purple over the past couple decades. And remember, Texas frickin' wasn't always heavy duty Republican. Ann Richards, they had a Democratic governor with her in what, the 90s, the
90s,
aughts?
I think that was, yes.
Yeah. And so Texas could turn again, except it can't because the Republican leadership, which is like among the most corrupt leadership of any state government, those guys are dicks. They keep it nice and red when it comes to voting via, you know, games with, for instance, a couple elections ago, and I assume it's still true, your hunting license was sufficient ID to vote. You show up and your hunting license doesn't have your picture on it. It's just a piece of paper. But your college ID, which has your picture on it, that's not good enough to vote because hunters vote red and college students tend to vote blue. So let's screw over the college students.
We're going to screw them over and everything like that and all along those lines. Now, this one actually kind of touched me and everything. If I can get it up and everything along those lines. And it actually did with something that I know Kim's been very much interested in, which is this idea of us basically trading and everything in human bodies and of human trafficking and all along those lines. But this dealt with not so much immigration, but adoption. But it was kind of startling. And by the way, I was listening to a radio show that was also a live stream earlier today. And it's on the same channel that Travis Smiley is on out of Los Angeles. But they were talking about the statistics that exist with abduction of youth and everything. And apparently, which I did not realize, even most of the Amber Alerts that we hear more about is like the famous cases like John Bonet and everything like that. But the majority of the people that are actually abducted, whether they're abducted from family members, like, the spouses are arguing or whatever, are majority in the minority community, which I did not realize till I was watching the woman that comes on before Travis Smiley. And she had a rapper that had his child abducted by his now ex-wife or the mother of the child, because I'm not sure if they were ever married or not, but it was definitely some of that abduction that goes on. And apparently, like I said, but that it is an underreported incident that a lot of the people that are being abducted are actually minority children. But apparently that's something that she brought up with it, that's underreported.
So, the numbers are all over the place. So I just looked it up and AI tells me that that stranger abductions, I guess in the U.S., the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimates that 4,000 to 20,000 stranger abductions by non-family members occur each year. However, an earlier figure of 50,000 is still widely quoted. So they don't even know. It could be 4,000. It could be 50,000. So it's a really hard thing to track. Then the U.S. Department of Justice estimates that more than 200,000 kids are victims of family abduction each year.
Right.
And then Child Watch of North America estimates that 800,000 children are reported missing each year. Of all the numbers, that number sounds the most bullshit. Where does that number frickin' come from? That seems like lunatics behind that.
Well, that's what D.L. Hughley was talking about this, and apparently it was a 60-minute story, which actually shocked me and everything. But apparently there's this notion of rehoming, which is the disturbing underground trade where unwanted children are paraded at events or advertised online to lure prospective new parents. So that just seems like a little weird that you're going to have basically a almost like a pageant in order to find your next child that you want.
Child abduction is a serious thing, but the field of child abduction seems to have a lot of bullshit.
Young lady
who
is looking for her forever family. She describes herself.
It's a parade like no other. Abandoned children desperately selling themselves to win over a new family, a new start.
She also likes drawing and doing arts and crafts.
And in the audience, sizing them up to find a perfect match, are their potential parents.
Okay, Michaela, you look so
It is distressing, tragic, and completely legal. Here in the US, it's a phenomenon known as rehoming, where, along with matching events, troubled kids are advertised like goods on eBay and given to anyone who'll take them. Mostly they're adopted and often wear the scars of abuse and neglect. Most disturbingly, their parents have decided they no longer want them.
Desperate people do stupid things and desperate things. There should be legal structures and social structures and professionals who know what the hell they're doing around all of this. If we don't protect vulnerable children, who do we protect?
That was just kind of disturbing, this notion of having literally a pageant.
Okay, so we microchip pets. You put in a little RF, whatever you call it. It's the size of a grain of rice, and it helps you find your dog or cat if they go missing. We should microchip kids, and it's only this big, and you put it someplace where the bad guys won't easily find it. And I don't know, would that help? Even if it helps in only 10% of cases, just frickin' chip your kid. I don't know. Do they even do that?
I don't know. I know they chip pets because I've had I've had cats, and I've had definitely people in my family that have had dogs and other pets. So I know that they microchip and chip animals left and right. I'm not sure they do that with kids. I would imagine they probably could, but they do it regularly with the pet population.
Can you hear it? I'm looking at it. Can you microchip your child?
And the ethics behind it, because that's probably what people would complain about, would be the ethics.
Yeah, that's true. That comes up here, but why you can't so my first microchips implanted in pets do not track location. They only store identification information retrievable by a scanner.
Right.
All right, so you can't do that. You can't have something that beeps and lets people know where you are. But if a kid shows up and nobody knows who that kid belongs to, so they say it's highly controversial, legally questionable. But frickin', there is tech. You can track your kids via their cell phones at least. But I don't know. So the numbers for abducted kids range from 4,000 a year to 800,000 a year, which means that there's a lot of BS flying around in the area.
a whole lot of BS flying around in the area. It's interesting to see what this all BS is about and what's going on in that space.
I mean, we can figure it's not 800,000 kids, because then we would see more instances of, we'd see like sex slave rings and all sorts of stuff. And, it would be hard to keep 800,000 kids disappearing a year secret.
I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine earlier today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. He is of the opinion that independents, meaning independent musicians, are going to be in a better place to be in terms of the music world and everything because of the Puffy situation and other situations, including Cosby, that the entertainment industry is about to explode, which will open the industry up for indies. And you were in that space of being a entertainment game and everything like that. So do you think that there will be an explosion that will allow more indies to come in, because with Puffy and everything and all along those lines, it's going to be easier?
All right, so I gotta say, I was in entertainment for decades and I saw some stuff, but mostly what I saw was people working their asses off. So in New York, the bars stay open till 4 or 5 in the morning. Sometimes they go all night. In LA, the bars have to close at 2 a.m. and a lot of bars are dead by midnight because people have to get up and work in the morning. And in the 70s, like there's a movie out about the first episode of SNL in 1975. And there's coke flying around all over the place. You read about, a lot of cocaine in the 70s.
Right.
And you look at the TV of the 70s, and it kind of looks like there was a shit ton of cocaine. It's lazy, haphazard TV. But in my experience, in the offices where I worked, there wasn't instead of cocaine, there were fiber gummies to help you shit, because you were sitting at your desk writing jokes all day and you get stopped up. And like I had like exercise equipment, and a couple people had exercise stuff. Now we were not like partying and sexually harassing. We were working our asses off because entertainment is freaking hard. Even on the Man Show where I worked, there was no sexual harassment. Even on a show that was kind of based on the idea of sexual harassment, Girls on Trampolines, there was no sexual harassment. There were just people working hard and trying to generate a good product through the first 4 seasons at least, because by the end of the 4th season, Adam and Jimmy, the hosts of the show, had better opportunities. And they left the show and they were replaced by Doug Stanhope and Joe Rogan. And that 5th season, which none of the old guys worked on, we understand was a much more misogynistic season. So, but in the first 4 seasons of the Man Show, just people working hard, not misbehavior. And in fact, like one of the most famous juggies, the juggies were the women on the Man Show who danced in lingerie. And like the Suzanne, Juggy Suzanne became, and I think remains, like Kimmel's head bookkeeper. He took a lingerie woman and gave her a job of running the business of the whole freaking show. So I've seen more examples of people behaving in an upstanding way than
Not wait until we jump into the conversation.
I had a producer on another show, on a Fox show, an executive producer, a freaking great guy, just a big, burly, weightlifting farm kid who was gay, but in a pirate way, like some guys are like too manly to have sex with women. They just have to have sex with men. And this guy, he was the most competent producer maybe I've ever worked with. Nothing fazed him. Whatever problem came up, just solved it, frickin'. And he would lightly sexually harass my writing partner. Just grab his nipples, and not really for sexual gratification, but because it was a stupid thing to do. But I got jealous because my chest was I think a lot better than my writing partner's chest, yet my chest wasn't getting grabbed. And I'm like, hey, I was like, what the heck is this? What about my nipples? So I had to stand up for myself to get sexually harassed by our boss.
He had to get sexually harassed by people. By the way, Jatovy had written a couple of comments. So I guess he said that one of the things you said was the premise of Logan's Run. I do remember Logan's Run, and he said that that's a GPS device. So he might have been talking about the whole notion of kind of chipping people and everything. And he said that there are gatekeepers still. And I do agree there are plenty of gatekeepers that are still out there and everything along those lines. So
Logan's Run was a famous science fiction movie of the 70s where they lived in a utopia, except the dirty little secret of the utopia is you get killed once you're 30. So everybody's young and hot, and everybody hooks up with everybody else because young and hot, but nobody lives past, they get executed when they're 30.
Yeah, I do remember that. And it wasn't that because how long did people live in Soylent Green? Because I know that was the notion of when the people were literally eating each other, even though they did not realize that they were eating each other.
Yeah, all right. So Star Wars in 1977 was one of the first great science fiction movies that looked great and plausible and had shit going on in space, which is really what you want from science fiction. Before then, either the stuff in space looked like crap or was ponderous like 2001: A Space Odyssey, but mostly looked like crap, ships on strings and stuff. Yeah. So you had to have your science fiction on the ground. So Soylent Green was a dystopia in future New York. Yeah. So it was easy to make future New York look like shit in the 70s because regular New York looked like shit in the 70s. So we had a bunch of cheesy science fiction that was.
Well, some people would argue that natural disasters is what helped make New York look better, and whether that or man-made disasters, whether that's 9/11 or I remember I went up to New York right after Sandy. I had gone up to a conference. Of friends of mine were definitely far on the left, and they were going up to a far left conference. I think it might have even been the socialist conference and everything, but I tagged along with them and everything. And that was right after Sandy. And so the not the bridges, but the tunnels going into New York were very clean. Cause generally speaking, that has a lot of graffiti, but the water of Sandy pretty much cleaned it up.
There's a saying in science fiction that science fiction isn't really about the future. It's about the present. Right. But you exaggerate what the present is like by saying, well, that's what it's going to be like in the future. And movies about disaster movies about New York are really kind of about how shitty New York can be. Like Escape from New York, which was a great, cheesy, but awesome, I think 1970s, maybe 1980s.
I think Siege was set in New York because Siege was basically a Black Panther type movie because the city was basically taken over by Black nationalists, for lack of a better term, and everything. But I know it was set in New York because they had broken off one of the boroughs. I don't think they broke off all of New York, but I think they broke off one of the boroughs and pretty much ran it there for a while. And in real life, there was a stool within, and I think that's how they got captured at the end of the movie because the stool pretty much got them caught and captured and everything along those lines. If I remember the plot of the movie correctly.
I think, and Jatovy can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Black Panthers existed in Marvel comic books before they existed in real life. I think, didn't Stan Lee come up with the idea of Black Panther and in 1962 or 3, and then the Black Panthers as a political group didn't show up until a couple of years later.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they would say that they were the same thing, but yes,
not the same, but
Black Panther. There's a character there, and all on those lines, like you said, Jatovy can correct if he's still listening and everything. I do have a question for you about television and all along those lines, because I remember and it's still political to some degree. I remember since you were in that industry, when my dad was very much watching a lot of those movies, because he's the one that told me about the double entendres within Shrek and everything, and how it's got both humor for kids and humor for adults. But he also pointed out, and it might have been Jaws or it might have been Orca, but one of those movies that featured a killer whale or a killer shark, the shark looked very bad. So as one that worked at Hollywood, where there's some places, because I think he even said that he saw the string on one of those movie sharks and everything. So there was definitely, and this would have been in like probably the 70s. It seems like there was some very bad kind of like special effects in that time and everything.
Yeah, well, okay. There are various issues with science fiction in TV and the movies, and one issue historically is it was limited budgets and limited technological effects meant that most science fiction looked like crap until Star Wars.
Right.
And also it was low budget, so you had to confine yourself to stuff you could do cheaply. Like there was like a scary horror movie about a guy whose head was in a bottle. You know, he was just a head connected to a bunch of wires. And even so, he managed to murder a bunch of people because he was a bad guy. But, you know, like nobody's going to want to see that except for like kids. You know,
kids would want to see that. And like, by the way,
and
you told me
so that's
the Black Panther.
Issue 2 is that a lot of producers and writers of TV and movie science fiction aren't overly familiar with all the science fiction that's been written in novels and short stories. So they end up spitting out their first thoughts, and it's a bunch of cliches that people who like science fiction have seen and heard a million times.
Yeah, by the way, Toby said the thing with the Black Panthers, that was a great question, because he said that he thinks they were roughly at the same time and all along those lines. And he did say on the side, Gotham was New York, and I did hear that even from the Batman movies and writing and everything. And many of Marvel's settings were set in New York. So New York has definitely been a major part of the comic and storytelling lexicon and everything.
Yeah, the trailer for the new Superman movie came out today.
Oh, cool.
By James Gunn, who did Guardians of the Galaxy and did the Suicide Squad movie that didn't suck, the second one. So it could be good. It's got Mrs. Maisel as Lois Lane.
Yeah, so it could be a good one.
Though, I mean, but the trouble with Superman is that he's based on a model from Superman, I think, came out in 1938. I think Superman, Batman, both 1938, I think. And back then, Superman being like a newspaper reporter made sense. I don't know how they're going to update it. And I mean, because like...
Well, coming back to politics and everything, and Toby can answer in chat since he's not online and everything. I have my theory as to who he would be if they were characters and everything. Some people might think that Elon Musk would be a good Riddler, and maybe Trump could be the Joker. But if they were characters from the comic books, who would Trump and Elon Musk be in your mind? So what characters do they remind you of? Because like I said, some people in my mind.
Well, Trump is dumb Lex Luthor.
Okay.
You know, whenever you talk, I'm sorry, I'm liberal. And so when I compare Trump to anybody, it's always that person plus dumb. Trump is dumb Putin. Trump is dumb this. You know, Elon Musk is just regular Lex Luthor, but with hair flips. You know, Lex Luthor, I think of like one of the excuses I use not to go into physics. A, I was lazy, but B, they had pictures of all the grad students in physics at my college up on a wall behind a glass case. And I looked at them and none of them had hair. And I'm like, holy shit, all these guys thought so hard. They heated up their head and cooked all the hair off their head. I said, I want to keep some hair.
You want to keep
So-
some hair? You've done a good job of keeping the hair. And
Well,
by the way,
it's
Toby
hair
said
plugs. It's Rogaine. I
Right.
eyedropper this junk on my head a couple times a day. It's pills, and
pills
so
and all of that. Toby did have an answer. He said that movie you're talking about looks like the Justice League version of the Suicide Squad, and Crypto is the wrong breed. He said
Yeah,
the boys.
the new Crypto is like-
He said the boys is a spoof on our current political reality, and Homelander is a direct mockery of who Trump is and what he represents.
Yeah, and the Boys is a much. I mean, the Boys goes for insane shock value. They look, but it is much more thought out in terms of the current reality than like a Superman. Like for Superman to be effective now, he would need to have like a Batman type command center that compiles like events from all over the globe. Now, Superman, I don't know, he can probably get to any place on Earth in under 20 minutes, probably even faster than that. And to maximize Superman's use, he would need to be getting like a Twitter feed of this is going on, school bus in trouble, earthquake in Guatemala, so that he can scoot all over the world. And he would constantly feel guilty for not being able to save people all over the world, 24/7. The Superman in 1938 had limited information, so he had an excuse for not being able to save everybody. But now, with worldwide communication, Superman should be zipping all over the place.
So the Boys, though, I think does a phenomenal job at spoofing what actually Superman would be, what all the superheroes would be in this day and age, because I mean, sure, they have the shock value and everything, but if you think about it, that's the way a lot of these superheroes or anybody with special powers would be in terms of testing it out. Because we've always said, from watching Star Wars, if you think about the Force, what you would do with the Force, if you had X-ray vision, what would you do? And it's always something dastardly. But if you look at
the first 5 minutes of the first episode of The Boys, this guy is walking with his girlfriend, and she steps off the curb, and the Boys version of the Flash is running by at, I don't know, 3,000 miles an hour and runs through her, and she explodes because she just crashed into a thing moving faster than a bullet, and just her jawbone is left, plus the big splash of blood. And the Boys, the superhero and the Boys are always creating mass liability events.
Well, even more so, the reason, one, remember in the show that got covered up by the company that the Boys was making a ton of money off of, because they utilized the actual powers to make tons and tons of money. And it was always about power and money. So when that happened, they actually, he apologized, but didn't really care because he's a superhero and it didn't matter to him. It was just the fact that he had to watch out for his image, because if his image took a hit, that means he lost his position, he lost his power, and he lost his money. And that's what was so good about it. Like, even they kind of did the whole terrorist situation where, you're trying to save the airplane, but the individual who is Superman or Homelander ends up, y'all don't appreciate me, I don't really care, I'm just going to kill you anyway. He ends up killing everybody, then goes and then apologizes in front of the camera that, oh my goodness, they tried their best, but it just blew up. So if you think about how well and thought out it was about what would be covered up by the company that's making money off of these individuals, and how these individuals could get away with practically murder. Just because of
just about every episode.
Mm-hmm. And that was if the gentleman, I cannot remember his name right now, the individual who played Homelander, because he after season 2, I think they were talking about it, about how he patterned his character, and Trump was actually the inspiration for it. Parts of Trump was the inspiration for it, because he was making a mockery of how crazy and power hungry, and he did how much Trump just doesn't care. And so that was who he had kind of patterned Homelander off of. He even, after, I think it was right before this election, he was embarrassed that people were championing Homelander, as, you know, outlandish and outrageous as he was, and his morals of, you know, his abuse to his son, to, you know, his fetishizing lactation, and it just all the things that he was into.
Has a sexual kink where he gets off on drinking milk from lactating mothers.
Yep.
Homelander is like just a great, horrible character.
He is one of the best villains, because I mean, even his racism is there, his sexism. I mean, it was just everything about him was everything that you didn't want. But again, he pointed out, like I said, in a recent article, I think it was earlier this year, but talked about, how he felt bad that people were loving on him as he's mocking.
Yeah, well, so, I mean, Homelander is the equivalent of Superman. He's the most powerful of the superheroes in that universe, and he seems to be unstoppable.
Yep.
And he's one in a fairly long line of people, of producers and writers asking, well, what would happen if Superman were bad? There's been
a lot of those kind of movies that Superman was bad or Batman was bad. And I know there's been some of those movies. Just really quickly, because I know we've got a few minutes and got to get ready to wrap
I was going to say this one real quick, Mark.
Because I was going to ask you what you thought about Herschel Walker, because me and Rick were talking about that, because apparently he's going to be the ambassador to the Bahamas. Like, I can really see Herschel Walker doing a lot for the Bahamas.
Yeah, Herschel Walker should be the ambassador to go to a mental rest home. That dude is an idiot. I have nothing to say good to say about Herschel Walker. But in terms of, because I wanted to give Rick another one to look out for, actually you too, Mark, because you might like the storyline behind him, because it's another superhero type, Superman character.
Okay.
There's an anime called One Punch Man. Beautiful. It's written really well. The character or the lead character is his real name is Saitama, but he's One Punch Man. But what ends up happening is he is a direct spoof on the idea of Superman. Basically, an individual that's unbeatable, that's overpowered in every which way. But this individual, instead of like your Superman or even like your Homelander that wants to, either kill everybody or save everybody. No, One Punch Man is just bored. He just became a hero because he's bored.
Hancock is a great movie like that.
This is better than Hancock. Because Hancock was cool because it had its parts, but this is just dumb. The guy he literally doesn't, he does because he'll get tied up a little bit. Like there's one episode, you may or may not watch it, but one episode, which was the funniest. He was basically, there's this evil empire that's coming out that's trying to kill everybody, going through town, killing people. He just so happens that he gets called to go to this area to stop these individuals. He doesn't really want to go. The guy who is basically infatuated with him because he wants to be his disciple. So he calls him his master and all this other stuff because he wants to be his sensei, or wants him to be his sensei. But he goes to this area to deal with these guys. And it turns out, well, these guys are beating up the individual who's wanting to be his disciple. But then, he has to go through this facility, and he goes through the facility, of course, beating everybody. But then he gets to the final guy. The final guy is this super huge hulking dude that's about to destroy everything. And so he starts hitting on Saitama and beating on him. Of course, Saitama's not getting any damage taken, but he's just taking the hits.
All right, I want to bring up one more thing, and I just found out they made it into a movie called Superman Red Sun, which asks, it came from DC, and it asks the question, what if the spaceship that brought baby Superboy to Earth crash landed in Russia instead of America? Now, Superman would still be standing up for truth and justice, but he'd be a tool of the communist government without really knowing that the communist government was shitty. And so it was a 3-issue comic book series from DC, and I just see that they made it into an animated movie. So
Yeah. There's also, I mean, a few other shows, animated and even comic books where, you know, Darkseid's one of the biggest villains, takes over Superman or convinces Superman to come to his side. Darkseid is trying to kill everybody. So there are a couple that deal with Superman being dark, but none come close to like what Homelander does.
well, that show is they just try to make it as one guy has shrink power.
Oh, yeah.
Superhero, and he's gay, and the deal is his lover, I mean, this is one of the creepiest gross outs in the whole series. He shrinks down and he climbs inside his lover's pee hole. He's inside his lover's penis, I think, and he sneezes, which causes him to snap back to full size, which means he explodes his lover. And every time something like this happens on the show, just meat flies every place. You know.
Yeah, I think it's a great show. There are a few others, like Watchmen is another good one, and that deals with a lot of politics.
Well, you got different versions of Watchmen. You got the comic book, you got the 80s movie, which was great but flawed, and then you have the TV series, which is also great and weirdly decided to teach America about the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1922.
Yep. And the interesting thing about that is a lot of people didn't know about Black Wall Street or these other massacres that happened around the nation until that came out, because you had people didn't know about the massacres that went on down in here in North Carolina in Wilmington, where basically people found out that the land down by the ocean was going to be rich. So what did? They burnt out all the Black people.
So there's a movie to be made where a limo or an SUV or a couple SUVs full of 1990s gangster rappers, fully armed because they're in the middle of a war with some other group of rappers, somehow time travels down to like 1910 Gainesville, where there's about to be a race massacre. And a bunch of rappers who won't take any shit take on the Klan.
Well, then,
That's what I was hoping.
We got the other show going on, but I got to end it. Y'all gonna talk after I end the show, but that's what I put the ending on.